There's lots of good news this time. Yesterday, we were talking about a travel bubble. We'll get to that in just a moment. I want to get started, though, get your thoughts on what's happening politically. I mean, this imminent group resignation of the opposition in Hong Kong. Edward, you, of all people, know sometimes politics has no effect on the economy. Sometimes it does. What's clear, though, is the political reality in Hong Kong is changing. That's a fact. Do you think what's happening now potentially could be disruptive to the economy?
Well, I think people who know Hong Kong or people who do business in Hong Kong knows that, well, Hong Kong is a very dynamic city, free and competitive. And we are also not free from sort of politics, both local and geopolitically around the world. Of course, I think we also need to sort of uphold certain principles, particularly those constitutional obligations, which we have seen that we are all sort of trying to cope with it. But I think, like any jurisdiction, the fundamental must be something constitutional, like what's in our basic law, upholding the responsibility of both the executive and also the legislature. And I think the question you mentioned is one that's being put in the basic law that, well, every member of both executive and also legislative chamber would need to sort of pledge their allegiance to uphold, say, the basic law, the national security and national interest as well. So I think it's a matter of sort of constitutional obligations. But of course, I think, well, people will continue to look at Hong Kong in totality, that yes, we are, like many parts of the world, we are struggling in fighting against the epidemic and also sort of fighting to sort of come out of the economic recession brought about by all these external and internal factors.
Yeah, and I think the initial GDP numbers out a few days ago do indicate we're coming out of that. We're getting the final GDP numbers, I believe, tomorrow. What's the messaging then, Edward, to the international business community and markets in the event, and who knows really where the political spectrum is going, in the event that we don't have an opposition on the political spectrum, which, as you perhaps alluded to, last 50 years has been a part of why the economy has been so vibrant. Why do you think that should not be an issue then?
I think Hong Kong will remain sort of a vibrant, dynamic, and well, in every legislation, I think you will expect different voices, and the composition of our legislature is also being done in the same way. But of course, as I mentioned, there are bottom line, there are basic principles that, well, all members would need to uphold.
Secretary Yao, we're just going to bring our viewers some live pictures now. I believe we're going to see some live pictures of LegCo. The first time we've had a look inside the Legislative Council since that resignation of those 4 members. And of course, the desire now by other pro-democratic legislators there to quit en masse as a result of those 4 legislators being forced out of LegCo. So we're seeing live pictures there from Hong Kong. Secretary Yao, let me ask you about the incoming Biden administration into the US. What would you point to in messaging to that administration to argue and make the case that China hasn't and that Hong Kong hasn't simply become just another Chinese city? What can you point to demonstrate that?
Well, first and foremost, I think Hong Kong's message does not confine to a single country. Hong Kong sort of interact with the whole world. Hong Kong is also a member of many international organizations. In my sort of area, in the trade area, Hong Kong is a member of the World Trade Organization among 164 other members. And we trade extensively with the world. Of course, I think people who do business in Hong Kong will know that, well, Hong Kong is open and competitive. Anybody can come to do business. Of course, I think in every sort of jurisdiction, we need to sort of tackle problems of our own, including our own constitutional arrangement. The past 2 years, we have seen a lot of sort of ups and downs, including the social unrest that happened last year, and even challenges to our sort of institutions. And I think it is incumbent upon Hong Kong as a whole to cope with those situations. But well, as you see from the footage you showed, that well, our legislature remain a very important component in Hong Kong, where laws are being made, public finance are being sort of census scrutinized. we still have, I think, as government officials, every day, I think we, like many other officials around the world, we have to sort of interact with our legislature because there are checks and balances there, which is fully sort of enshrined and protected under the basic law. I think, well, that's the everyday life will continue. But of course, in the commercial world, people will look at Hong Kong essentially on the big pillars: the rule of law, the freedom, and also the level playing field that we set for everybody who trade and sort of do business in Hong Kong.
Yeah, let me switch focus now to the complaint that you filed. You mentioned the WTO. You filed with the WTO on November the 3rd over this Made in China label that the Trump administration is insisting on. What is the effect on manufacturers? Because, of course, that order kicked in on November the 10th.
Well, Hong Kong's position is more than just the dollar sign. Well, if we are talking about Hong Kong's export to the US direct, it only constitutes 0.1% of Hong Kong's total export. So in dollar terms, it looks as sort of a rather minute, but it's a matter of principle. Imagine that a member of WTO enjoying a separate and independent membership would be deprived of the right to claim its origin rule in line with all other members. I think it's a blatant sort of infringement of the rights under the World Trade Organization. It went against the sort of commitment in the general agreement on tariff and trade. So I think as for Hong Kong, well, we are fighting this battle not just between Hong Kong and US, between which should have a lot of mutual sort of interests. Not to mention US enjoy in fact the world's largest trade surplus from Hong Kong, but also for the multilateral trading system that it must be rule-based. In case of dispute, it should be settled according to the rules set out by WTO. I think that's the area that we are sort of pursuing Hong Kong interests, and we are pursuing entirely following the procedures under the World Trade Organization dispute settlement mechanism.
Edward, just to pivot again, want to talk about some good news. The travel bubble was announced yesterday. I think it's about a flight a day, and not that one flight a day should incrementally change the growth, the GDP number of Hong Kong. If it did, we're a tiny economy here. People have started now to talk about the mainland and when that border then fully opens up. Where are you in that conversation with the mainland?
Well, I think Hong Kong talks to the entire world, including our own country, where we maintain a boundary and also sort of a CIQ control. I think the arrangement of bubble is one, not just between Hong Kong and the immediate partner. We will also hope that this model, if it works, will be a sort of extension of the network of safe, secure, and yet facilitating channels. Now, take, for instance, the Hong Kong-Singapore bubble arrangement is one that places equal emphasis on safety and security on one side and trade facilitation on the other. Among the 5 conditions that we set out, 2 were on the sort of safety and security, which include the tests that Hong Kong and Singapore both introduced pre-departure. And in the case of Hong Kong, we have a double sort of assurance that upon arrival, we'll do another sort of PCR test. And in addition, we are talking about using a bubble flight. That means there were no sort of mingling of other passengers on transit. So making sure that the passage is safe and secure. Now, in return, we consider it will be safe and secure to do away with the quarantine requirement, which is putting quite a barrier to normal trading. And also, there will be no control on the itinerary. Now, but of course, the whole arrangement should be subject to science that, well, if there are circumstances that there is an outbreak in either places, we need to have a mechanism to put a brake to the system or adjust it. But if time and circumstances allow, I think that could be extended. So hopefully, well, if this model works, I hope that the whole world can bring back some sort of normal traveling, be it business, family reunion, going out for leisure. I think that's the hope that we hope to sort of bring a small contribution to the wider network of traveling in the world.
Yeah, I think the world does share that view. I haven't even seen my family physically in a very long time, Edward. So talk to us about timetables then. Final question for you. I guess these 2 things are obviously connected with one another. What is your view on when do you think we might see a similar setup with mainland China in terms of a bubble, if you will? And connected to that is we're in a recession right now in Hong Kong. GDP numbers are coming out tomorrow. When do we come out of a recession, Edward?
I think that your second question is $1 million question that, no one can claim that we are walking out from the woods without first containing the disease. So I think we have put in a lot of efforts among all the government in the world. But looking at, I think, the Hong Kong experience, the mainland experience, and also the Singaporean experience tells that, with the containment of the disease, then we are able to sort of go further in sort of going about bring back some normal traveling business exchanges in a safe and secure manner. And it must also be helped by science that, we need to bring in reliable tests, be they the PCR test or some of the rapid tests on trial. Well, there shouldn't be any stop in pursuing all those sort of mechanisms, making sure that, traveling business trips would be safe and secure. Now, at the same time, I think, we have also need to look at the situation in between our partners, because it really takes two to tango. People need to be very comfortable that, allowing travel would not undermine the very hard effort that we made, because, communities as a whole have in fact contributed a lot by maintaining a strong compliance of social distancing. There are sort of a lot of pressure on medical and public health sort of colleagues in defending the war front with the virus. So I think it's a conglomeration of all the hard work, institutional strain, and also a lot of sort of discussion. And hopefully, with the success of certain this kind of bilateral or multilateral arrangement, we can bring back some sort of a normal traveling.